obviously compliance doesn't equal security, but
Correct.
I think the thing that compliance does is it helps start those conversations, and it does help create the right culture, I suppose, doesn't it?
It helps to kind of, if you take compliance in the right direction, some organizations take it from a checkbox approach, saying, we've done it, and we do the bare minimum to meet it.
Sure.
I think that's a wrong direction. Organizations, I think they should look at it from the security perspective and how it applies to their cyber risk or business risk.
Sure.
Then by following that, it will help you not only meet the compliance, but also help you make sure that you're actually reducing the cyber risk against your business. That's the right way of approaching it, because then you can really take the values that you get and those meaningful conversations, and also make it a much more cultural approach.
Yeah.
And that actually helps the business long term.
Yeah. You've mentioned culture a few times. It's critically important that you get that right security culture right from the top down, right?
Absolutely, it's both directions. We have to make sure that it's endorsed and practiced and messaged from the top down, but we also want to make sure that everyone in the organization from the bottom up feels empowered as well. One of the failures we've done in the past is that we victimized people who were part of an incident, whether somebody clicked on a malicious email and all of a sudden lost money financially, or whether they didn't patch the server or that server was used to gain access to sensitive data. We have victimized those people who actually made the mistakes. And rather than, I think we need to take the approach that we need to empower people to speak out.
What can we learn from that? How can we stop that happening again?
One of the biggest messages I was asked a few years ago from education and from police and legal, there was one message that I could leave. It was one thing I could say to an organization that they could actually immediately take a difference, is that make sure that your employees are not afraid to speak out and to ask for advice. That's the key thing, is that your employees are not afraid to say that I clicked on something, I think it may have been bad, therefore they should not be afraid to speak to someone else about it and report it, because then you get somebody who's more communicative. You get somebody who will then speak to security team, and they can investigate it much earlier, because when we victimize people, they tend to hide it.
Yeah.
And the longer you hide it, the bigger of an issue becomes.
Yeah.
And this is what we want to avoid. So we need to empower people to be a better voice in the front line. When I'm doing ethical hacking, and I get to an organization where I find out that the employees speak and communicate a lot, it worries me, because any type of campaign I do, they will talk about it.
Of course.
So the more the employees talk, the higher risk it is for me of being detected. Yes. Yeah, and that's one of the things that I look to use different attack paths. Yeah. So making sure your employees are not afraid to speak and ask for advice.
And I think also with the way that sometimes security is communicated, sometimes it's done in such a boring way that you're given a book and they go, really? Yeah. Yeah, I've signed it for
in emails and policies and checkboxes.
And that's it. And I'm like, that's not going to create the right behaviour. That's not going to change. It's not going to change a culture.
Yeah, I think it's one thing I've met, kind of over the years. I've had many lessons that I've learned, and things of what not to do and how not to approach things. And many of those lessons were that when you check security, that you don't force it on people. You have to work with them. I think when you're going through these type of awareness campaigns or culture mindset, don't try to change people's minds. Try to understand them first, watch them learn, and then embed security into their existing behavior. It's a bit like, people have habits. We tend to do repetitive things. We do things that make our job easier, because many employees, their job is actually to do, business, is to help the business be successful. Sure. They're not measured on security. Right. So, and when organizations sometimes push security down, it actually makes them less efficient.
They become immune almost to the point,
it stops them from being able to do their job successfully, or it takes them longer to do tasks. So therefore, it impedes their efficiency. An example is that one of the metaphors, I tend to use metaphors to simplify a lot of things. And one metaphor I use is that you think about, an employee has been driving to work back and forward the same way over the last 20 years. That's how they do, they get to work. Sure. And all of a sudden security comes down and says, no, that road is known as really bad, it's not safe. So therefore, for the future, you need to get out of your car, you'll need to take the train, then a tram, then a bus, and then you need to walk 5 minutes, because that's much safer, that's a more secure way. We can monitor the activity and we can make sure that you get to work safely. And the employee's going, hold on, that takes me twice as long to get to work in the morning. Yeah. And that's when you're forcing security down people. You're changing what they're used to be doing to doing a different way. And the employees will always look for ways around it. They will look for ways to still be able to minimize their time, because their mindset is basically their KPIs, what they're being measured on. They want to make sure they're still effective and still meeting their goals and bonuses and success.
Yeah.
And I think that if you take that metaphor, I think what security should be looking at is that, well, let's look at the way that they drive to work.
Yeah.
And let's look at making that much more safer. Let's put controls in place, whether it be traffic lights or roundabouts or, or speed limits that actually reduce the risk. And that's what we really should be looking for, is rather than changing the way people do their job, is that reducing the risks in the existing ways that allows them to still be successful.
That's quite interesting, because obviously that refers back to what we were saying earlier about how CISO should communicate with the board. Essentially what we're trying to do here is translate it and put it into a way where it actually it's understood by the person you're trying to address. Going to the board every week and saying, "Oh, we're going to get breached. We're going to."
Fear doesn't work.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And then it comes to the point when you really do need their support. And they're like, "Yeah, you said that last week."
Yeah, I remember I did a pen test a number of years ago, and I finally got the permission to talk about it just recently, because they eventually put the right controls in place several years later. But that particular pen test, when we first went, me and the CISO went together and we presented to the board together. And all we did was talk about fear, security, technology, solutions. This is what you need to be doing. This is how you should be doing it. And we were pushing ourselves on the board, and hoping that this fear would all of a sudden get a budget signed.
Sure.
And right after the meeting, of course, the board goes to their side meeting. They go off and they make their decision, and they come back. And we're sitting there, and they said, budget declined, done. And we're like, why was it declining? We thought we presented such a solid fear to them. And they said, well, you didn't assign it to any type of business value. We're here to make sure the business is successful.
And we've been running it this long without that problem, with this problem, so why do we need to do it now?
And they said, our networks are gapped, and we considered this being a reduced risk. And we were so after that, we went to the side, we had the CFO, we had the CEO, and the CISO and myself, and we talked about it, and they said, you came to us in you didn't talk our language. Right. That you need to change the way that you talk to the board, because we want to know ROI, we want to know business risk, we want to know insurance, we want to know basically how it can help the business. Is it an enabler? They said, you just completely came with the wrong approach. You didn't give us any numbers. And I said, we'll give you another week. We have another decision making next week for kind of other tasks. Come back next week, and let's take a different approach.
Wow.
So we kind of did our homework. We did, of course, a little bit more penetration tests at a time, and then we went back a week later. We didn't talk about cybersecurity. We didn't say cybersecurity once. We actually went and we completely focused on the gap of the finances. We talked about the reduction of risk, what that dollar sign was a reduction in risk.
Right. Yeah.
We basically took a pure business approach. Didn't talk about solutions, didn't talk about technology, didn't talk of fear, didn't talk about cybersecurity. Wow. We spoke the same language as the board. Yeah. Right after that meeting, they signed the budget, and we went away. And this is kind of realization to me, and this is probably the many times that even industry-wise we fail, because we come from an industry that's how we talk.
That's it.
And then that's kind of put onto CISOs, and then CISOs go and relay that to their peers.
That's it.
And it's the wrong message.
You just go full staff. Yeah.
So it's an industry thing we need to reset a bit and think about, what do we want to be when we grow up? How can we make sure that we change it from being a fear factor to being something that's really a business factor?